Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Ukraine war breaking news update. I was thinking about doing one late last night, but there just wasn't enough decent information about this. Now it's starting to filter through. So this is a breaking news update for the 15th of January 2024. What are we going to talk about? Well, 2 Russian planes. Let's talk through how the kind of news came out. Initially, this was a sort of communique that came out. The armed forces shot down 2 Russian planes over the Sea of Azov. Mizyagin, deputy of the VRU Committee on National Security, reported. The initial claims were that, or at least the initial rumors were, that the Ukrainian forces shot down 2 planes. An A-50 was shot down, and an IL-22M was shot down, but it was in the air and tried to reach the nearest airfield, but disappeared from radar after the descent in the Kerch area. Okay. PS01 here saying a Russian A-50 was reportedly shot down, while IL-22M has requested an emergency landing, and that's from, as mentioned, Yuri Mizyagin, a member of the Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence. A-50 is an early warning and control aircraft. So that's one of these ones that has the spinning radar on the top. It was the one that we have seen damaged at an airbase in, was it in Belarus, where one was damaged at an airfield. They don't have too many of these. They are really expensive. Some saying, 3 to 350 million, others saying sort of 275 million. These are high value bits of kit, and to lose one of them is really problematic for the Russians. We'll go on and talk about that a little bit at the end, but that's basically the A-50. You will have seen them before. And then the IL-22M, it's not the IL-22, which is like an old bomber. This is the same designation, but it's the IL-22M Airborne Command Post, a modernized version. It looks like that. If you remember when Wagner were doing their mutiny, they shot down one of these with 10 people on board, 10 really quite important people on board, specialists and fairly high-ranking people, because it's a command post. Here, the IL-22M Airborne Command Post version, same as the IL-22, but had new mission equipment. So again, high-value piece of kit. Forbes reported today, or actually on the 14th, so that's last night at 7 in the evening. Ukraine's RBC radio posted what it claimed was an audio recording of the IL-22's crew radioing an SOS-2 controllers, apparently in Anapa, on the Russian side of the Sea of Azov's southern coast, urgently requesting ambulance and fire crew, the crew radio. So this intimates that there were injuries on board, possibly deaths, who knows, and that fire crew, meaning that the plane was on fire. Here is the audio recording. I don't speak Russian, but so for what it's worth, it seems at the very least that the IL-22 suffered damage. According to Kyiv Independent, the 4-engine propeller-driven IL-22, which carries up to 10 people and helps to relay radio signals and coordinate frontline operations, was struck along the Sea of Azov coast on Sunday night. The Russian Air Force has just 30 IL-22s and variants after mutinous Wagner Group mercenaries shot down one of the pricey aircraft over western Russia in June. The Ilyushin command post is only slightly less rare than the Beriev early warning plane is, and that's the A-50 that was shot down supposedly as well, which is a 4-engine jet-propelled A-50, is Russia's answer to the United States' own main early warning plane, the Boeing E-3. The A-50's top-mounted radome contains a rotating radar that scans 360 degrees, detecting aircraft as far away as 250 miles. 15-person crew of an A-50 tracks enemy planes and coordinates the flights of friendly planes. So, yeah, this is, that a plane that is, as I've mentioned, high value. In fact, it references that one damage at the Belarusian airbase in February last year. Kyiv Independent claimed the A-50 was shot down immediately after it went on duty in Krylyivka area of Zaporizhia in southern Ukraine. The alleged shootdown reportedly occurred just 10 minutes after the IL-22 got hit. Now, the question is sort of what really happened. here it talks about, whether it was the Ukrainians shooting down or the Russians shooting their own planes down. There was a kind of waiting game to see what Russian sources were saying, because this gives us a good indication of what might have actually happened, and particularly sources like fighter bomber. So you don't really want to rely on rumors. And if you do rely on rumors, let's get the rumors from the Russian side to give us a kind of bit of a counterbalance to what you pro-Ukrainians are saying. So still a bit ambiguous, but fighter bomber seems to confirm the loss of the Russian A-50 aircraft over the Azov Sea yesterday. Someone suggested fighter bomber himself was on board. So this is a guy who is a pilot for the Russians who has his own Telegram channel. And so when he says stuff, generally you take it as having happened, as in, particularly when he says stuff about the Russians losing things. So if a Russian pilot himself is saying, yeah, we lost a couple of planes today and it was a bit of a shocker, then actually that carries with it a lot more weight than if he's saying, hey, we blew up 60 tanks. That is accepting a real issue for themselves, which means it's more likely true. Kind of enemy attestation, as it's sometimes called. Someone suggested fighter bomber himself was on board, but it doesn't seem to be the case. The last paragraph is also fairly cryptic, but it does mention air defense. Whether that was involved in damage to both the A-50 and IL-22M is unclear. So what does fighter bomber say? A tragedy is always a tragedy. So that's straight away something has happened, especially when it's on this scale. Regardless of who was on the plane, we most likely will not know who is to blame for the deaths of these pilots. To those who died, eternal flight. So people have died, which would suggest that a plane has gone down. To the wounded, a speedy recovery and return to duty. So that suggests that there are wounded and the plane has survived, or it's crash landed, or people were able to eject, but that's probably unlikely. Anyway, but you better demand the details from the Ministry of Defence, who consider themselves to be the real patriots of the country and know exactly what can be posted and what cannot. And yes, it's probably still worth trying to go back to the roots. When tank crews are commanded by tank crews, pilots by pilots, and anti-aircraft gunners by anti-aircraft gunners, it definitely won't get any worse. That intimates that it really does imply that there was air defence involved in there, and the people running air defence equipment and batteries aren't air defense trained people at root, and that could be the issue he's having. Nonetheless, let's carry on. So Phillips O'Brien says, waiting for confirmation, it's very risky to take on rumors. This was a couple of hours ago. Should seriously complicate Russian aircraft operations close to the battlefield, along with the recent shooting down of Su-34s, will make Russian pilots very jumpy. And if these were shot down by Patriots over the sea as of, so some people are putting out ranges of Patriots that place them in Zaporizhia or Donetsk regions, would still be able to have hit both of these planes. So the theory that it was a Patriot is still plausible. But anyway, would have meant that they would have been brought very close to the front lines, quite an operation. So if it was a Patriot launcher or battery, it's quite a risky move, because they would still have to be fairly close to the front line. Once again, Ukraine has brains and initiative to win the war if armed properly. Imagine what they'd do with ATACMS, Taurus, and major aid to develop UAV capacity. Some reports of Ukrainian confirmation that they did pull off the operation. So Jimmy Rushton here says, who is a Kiev-based foreign policy security analyst, and he says sources in the HUR, Ukrainian military intelligence, also confirmed to the Kiev Post that Ukraine was responsible for shooting down both the A-50 and the IL-22, but again did not give any further details. So here we have Tim White saying Ukraine's air defense is quietly intimating that it hit both Russia's big value planes tonight. It must be the Patriot system. No confirmation yet, but it looks highly likely. To me, both planes have been destroyed. The IL-22 disappeared from radar before an emergency landing. Can you imagine who has to wake Putin up with the news? Another head may roll in Russia's armed forces for this. Meanwhile, the Crimea bridge has reopened. So Budanov appears to have claimed that Ukraine was responsible for the shootdown. Scoop Lieutenant General Kirilo Budanov, commander of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Directorate, confirms to me that Ukraine shot at and destroyed the A-50 and damaged the IL-22M. He offered no further details. So that's Howard Altman saying that, who's senior staff writer at the Warzone Wire, former Military Times senior managing editor and military reporter. So The Ukrainians at some higher levels are claiming it is they that shot down these planes. However, other people are saying other things. So coincidences are not accidental. In my opinion, what I mean is that it is impossible to confuse the marks, even as a person with an average IQ. I'm talking about the tragedy in the sky. So this is another Russian source, according to Max23, doing a Google Translate here. If at least once someone was spanked for shooting at their own people, recognizing this case not as a mistake, but as a well thought out crime, there would be fewer such cases. Moreover, everyone must be punished and not look for a scapegoat in the form of an ensign. The motherland doesn't make planes so that some effort can shoot them down by mixing up the markings. This is implying that it was an air defense mistake. And here we have commentary from Russian sources, but it says Special Question Cat, judging by what has been said, at least the very fact that some kind of incident occurred with Russian planes over the Sea of Azov can most likely be considered confirmed. IL at home, it was hard, but the crew returned. Air defense, no words. So intimating it's the air defense again. No comments regarding the A-50 yet. Some comments about the A-50, then he says later, and IL-22M from Russian sources. One source associated with Russian military aviation said there is no desire or strength to comment on the night tragedy, eternal memory to the dead. So that sounds like the fighter bomber one. And then Russian, quote, military correspondent, propagandist Romanov says, an A-50 was shot down in the Sea of Azov area. The second damaged IL-18 or 22 landed in Anapa. The enemy has nothing to do with shooting down the aircraft. So that is the claim from Russians that it was air defense. In general, many Russian sources began to confirm the downing of an A-50 over the Sea of Azov. The main version of the Russian is friendly fire. Quote, the A-50 was really shot down. The entire crew died, shot down by friendly fire. Live with it now, says another Russian source. Ukrainian Air Force officially claims for the downing and damage of the Russian A-50 and IL-22M over the Sea of Azov. So that's the official line from the Ukrainians, that it was them. Here's another claim to friendly fire. At night over the Sea of Azov, our IL-22M air command post was shot down. The plane crashed and several crew members were wounded. At the same time, an A-50 airborne early warning control system was reported to have been shot down. The preliminary cause was friendly fire. The reasons for the possible failure of the friend or foe system are unknown. So on and so forth. Now, one more here. It is finally clear that the Russian IL-22 in the Sea of Azov area was hit by Russian air defense, which defended the Crimean bridge. At the moment the plane was hit, there was an alarm on the bridge and traffic was blocked. The pilot was able to land the plane and at least 2 people were injured. So it's difficult from our point of view to see who did what. And actually, the situation is a case of trying to control the narrative. You have something that's happened. Well, you have these 2 planes being shot down. I think we're fairly justified in believing that they've been shot down. So the Ukrainians are going to look at that and say, irrespective of what happened, they will want to deliver the news that puts them in the best light. And that's probably going to be our air defenses shooting down the aircraft, and that makes us look good. The Russians, interestingly, are in the same position, whereby what is less embarrassing for them? Is it less embarrassing that they shoot their own aircraft, or is it less embarrassing that the Ukrainians have shot them down? And I think, and we've seen this before, it has happened before. I think I've got a reference to this. So Trentelenko is saying, I didn't think Russia could be that incompetent. Of course, it isn't the first time Russia has claimed friendly fire when Ukraine has killed VKS planes and helicopters. So we've had this before. When the Russian VKS, Russian Air Force helicopters and planes were shot down by a Patriot system in Bryansk back in May last year, there were many Russian claims that it was Russian air defense doing that by mistake. And I think it's because it's better to show a screw up than to give Ukraine the bragging rights of being able to shoot down Russian aircraft deep into Russian territory. If you admit that, then you're admitting to your own domestic audience that Ukraine have got fairly decent capabilities, and they're able to use them, and they're successful in using them. And so I think it's less embarrassing if the Russians admit that they shot them down themselves. So I think no matter what happened, the Russians will probably claim it's air defense. And I guess no matter what happened, the Ukrainians declared that they did it. I would probably err on the theory that the Ukrainians did it, but I don't know that it matters all that much. I guess it does matter, actually, because the Ukrainians using things like Patriot air defense system close to the front lines is a really useful tactic that has worked, it appears, at least twice before, possibly 3 times before, to great effect. We have seen a number of Russian airplanes shot down, and it just goes to show how super useful such systems are. And if they could be used more frequently, then the Russians would be absolutely, up the creek without a paddle. There were claims yesterday, apparently, that the Russians had destroyed a Patriot air defense system. There were rumors hanging around. And this could be a kind of like, oh, really? You shot down a Patriot? Well, look what we've done. So, as Tim White says, I cannot verify this, but it's quite widely reported online now that the search and rescue teams in Russia have located the valuable Beriev A-50 plane shot down last night. The crash site is said to be the Obytochnya Spit in occupied Zaporizhia region, so that would be on the coast, the Azov coast. Yes, so there you go. That is what has happened. Just a little bit of analysis from David D here. A bit of a cheerleader for the Ukrainians, so, pinch of salt and all that. The A-50, and what is it? The A-50 is an airborne flying radar and command aircraft. There are only 15 of them, and many don't fly due to it being a hard aircraft to keep working. And remember that the A-50 has to cover the north, south, east, and west of Russia and Syria. So if they have just 2 in the Far East, 2 in the north, 2 in the Baltic, and 2 near Ukraine, that's probably the entire fleet. And if 30% are down due to normal issues, that's far fewer working. It is based on the IL-76 Candid Soviet-era transport, and like the US E-3 Sentry, has a large radar on top that spins. Russian aircraft have always been directed by other aircraft more than the West. It allows them to not have to use the fighter's radar until needed. In other words, the pilots are not great at finding targets by themselves. Or another theory could be that actually if they operate their own radar systems on the plane, it alerts them. It's like a big signal to the opposition to hit them with anti-radiation missiles, harm, and or whatever it is. So that's why they might prefer using this system. If the aircraft was shot, but I'm no expert, I could be wrong there. If the aircraft was shot down, this could be a big thing. This means that the aircraft was probably operating too close to the front, and had its radar turned to max, this would allow the Ukrainian Air Force to target it. I have a feeling that it was covering for the loss of the ground-based radars that have been getting hit or are down due to weather. Without radars, the Ukrainian Air Force can work the front without too much fear of ground units and who will not know when they are about to be hit. In other words, this is a sign that Russia may be running out of long-range ground radars and was using an A-50 to fill the gaps. This is a really plausible theory, and we have seen a number of radar systems being degraded, being attrited over the last 6 months, really, since the Ukrainian counteroffensive started in May, so maybe a little bit longer. Just routinely, I'm reporting over average number of Russian air defense systems being shot down, and other bits of equipment like radar equipment too. So this then could force the Russians to move their A-50 closer to the front line, which then makes it more vulnerable to being shot down itself. Again, we need to wait to see what happens. So anyway, I think this is a really significant bit of news. These are really high value pieces of kit that replacement costs will be, well, I guess prohibitive at the moment. They're not going to be making these at the moment, I wouldn't have thought. And so it's going to be a case of having to scrabble together to get their ones that aren't airborne at the moment, aren't operable, to get to them to a working state. Can they do that? Are they going to have their capabilities degraded? What's going to happen if they bring other A-50s from elsewhere around the kind of Russian Federation to be brought to bear near Ukraine? What will that say about these other areas? Can someone opportunistically take advantage of that lack of capability elsewhere? I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'm going to get on with my usual news videos for this morning. Toodle pips.